Us, if you're listening right now, you're tuned into Smooth 98.1 here on Smooth Breakfast with Ayo.
And Valentine.
And this morning, we're taking you through the stories on our newspapers and giving you detailed analysis of these stories. And joining us to do analysis, these are Adedumade. Welcome, Adedumade. I haven't seen you in a while.
Yes, good morning, Lagos. Good morning, guys.
Good morning to you. And of course, Deveo, the Ekuman.
Good morning, Lagos. A cool, hungry nation.
Very apt. Interesting. It's breakfast time, right? And
Yes,
of
sir.
course, we have Gbolahan at Mr. G Quest. Hello, Gbolahan.
Good morning, Valentine. Good morning, Ayo. And good morning, Lagos.
All right.
I said my morning.
Gbolahan. Send us your messages through WhatsApp to 0809-444-0981. That is our WhatsApp number for messages alone. All right. If you want to send more messages, you can also use Twitter, but use that hashtag freshlypressed981 so we can see your messages, and also YouTube.
On YouTube, we're streaming live. Go to youtube.com/smooth981fm. And on WhatsApp, like Valentine mentioned, we're reading your messages throughout the show 0809 444
Let's start with the first story before us from Thisday newspaper. Adedumade, you take this one first. Federal government woos owners of undeclared foreign assets with Amnesty and a Waiver. And this was presented by the Attorney General of the Federation and Minister of Justice, Abubakar Malami. He said this is part of efforts at repatriating and channeling Nigerians' funds outside the country into developmental projects. So essentially, the federal government on Tuesday announced this, and they called it the Voluntary Offshore Assets Regularization Scheme, VOARS. Kind of similar to the VADES program, the Voluntary Assets and Income Declaration Scheme. But this time around, this one is to give permanent, possibly permanent amnesty, or rather permanent waiver of criminal prosecution, and aims at providing tax amnesty to those found wanting. But your thoughts on this?
Yes, just like you said, it is an offshoot of the VADES that came out about sometime last year. It's also very important to note that this particular executive order was signed by President Buhari in October of 2018.
Yes.
And it started to run from the 8th of October 2018. So generally, it's a drive by the country to increase our tax base, develop our infrastructure with foreign investments, and also most especially boost non-oil revenue, which is quite important. What it provides is that eligible persons who hold offshore assets and income, will be expected to declare this within the 12-month period by which the VORS will be in operation. Now, upon declaration, the government will charge a 35% one-time rate on the worth of that income, and also a 2.5% administrative charge, while 63% will now become taxable under Nigerian laws. Now, defaulters of this VOARS, or this executive order number 8, yes, will be deemed to have defaulted, will be liable to charges, investigation, enforcement procedures as it relates particularly to that or to those income that they might have in any part of the world. Now, there's some questions that have arisen from actually this thing. Number one, there is the issue of the double taxation treaties which Nigeria has with a couple of countries, and what that treaty provides is that either country can tax the citizen on behalf of the second one. So now,
which is similar to the functions of the JTB, the Joint Tax Board, because there have been questions. First of all, pardon me for cutting in. 2 weeks ago, I asked Tunde Fala, who's the FIRS executive chair at the Nigerian Tax Outlook program that I hosted, and I asked him about the multiple taxation existing within states, and they said the JTB, the Joint Tax Board, were working towards harmonizing it. So, as a business owner, if you're working within the country, doing business among the different states, across different states, you wouldn't have to pay that tax across different states. Now, taking it outside the country is a welcome move, don't you think?
Yes, I think it's actually great, and you're very right. It is one that should be commended in the least, at least. But with regard to the VOARS, there are some assets that are already taxable under this DTT.
Okay.
And those assets can now no longer be taxable in Nigeria. So anybody who owns such will have to be sure to get proper advice as to not to, so that they don't become subjects of double taxation.
Taxation.
Yes. Now there are also the issue of people in Nigeria who are non-resident Nigerians, but who also have offshore accounts. They also will not be affected. Then foreign companies in Nigeria who have foreign assets, those ones as well will be exempted. Now, there's also the question of morality that comes into it, because what they're trying to say is that as long as you come forward with this offshore accounts or I'll say property, as the
Yes.
case may be,
Yes.
then you are allowed to keep 65% of it. So that means that people that perhaps this funds or this accounts or this properties are subject to or of should I say fraud, if there were fraudulent acts that related into the acquiring of those properties, that means if I come back to Nigeria with those properties now, all I have to do is pay 35% and I get to keep 65%
That's a very good
of
point
the
you made.
fraudulent returns that have come. So these are questions that have arisen from the VOARS. But like I said, it's a welcome
Development.
thing for the government to do generally. But I just hope that those little questions and the little
Checks.
need to be done.
Thank you, Adedumade, for that fantastic analysis. Let's move on now to this next one from the Punch newspaper. A few questions are trickling in. Please send in your messages to WhatsApp 0809-444-0981. And on Twitter at Smooth981FM, use the hashtag FreshlyPressed981. From the Punch newspaper, Gbolahan, have the story that reads, Buhari rejects Ajaokuta completion bill, National Housing Fund, others. So the president on Tuesday declined the assent to the bill seeking to fund the completion of Ajaokuta Steel Company, a company that keeps receiving, right? This was forwarded to him by the National Assembly and it was read on the floor of the House by the Senate President Bukola Saraki. He disclosed while reading this the response by the president that the issues that the president cited ranged from infractions on extant laws, duplication of responsibility of existing agencies, to financial constraints for refusing assent to this bill.
Yes.
Your thoughts?
Well, it's very interesting. I mean, just as you mentioned, the president declined assent to several bills. The Ajaokuta completion, the National Housing Fund bill. I think the one that actually hurts me the most anyway is the Federal Mortgage Bank of Nigeria bill 2018.
Why?
Well, because when we look at it, of course, we know what the nation is going through. We're talking about the 17 million housing deficits that we have in the country, and we know the value of shelter anyway for the common man as well too.
Yeah.
So our mortgages aren't really doing much in terms of providing affordable housing for the people.
Do they even exist right now? Are they available to the masses?
Exactly, that's what I'm saying. They're not available to the masses. So it's obvious that we need to do a lot more in terms of our mortgage. But that set aside anyway, the main highlight here is talking about the rejection of spending an additional $1 billion to complete Ajaokuta Steel. And I'll go back and just give a brief history about Ajaokuta anyway. Ajaokuta Steel is actually been running now. It's a project that has been ongoing for about 40 years now.
Ajaokuta Steel has been dormant as a company.
Completion, yes.
Okay,
when I say completion, as in the project, not to revive it, it has never even produced a single ton of steel. So it's still a work in progress so far, and it's been 35 years now that the project has been ongoing, and the government has spent $10 billion so far for this project. Last year, if I recollect as well too, in this same radio station, we were talking about the government actually planning to sell off the Ajaokuta Steel before December. There were talks anyway.
Concession in it.
Yes, exactly. But later on, they came back and said, no, we weren't actually having that conversation. So right now, the Senate has actually put the bill forward for funding it by an additional $1 billion to complete it. And how were they looking at funding this? They were actually looking at getting money from the excess crude account. But when we look at the excess crude account as well too, I'm not even sure you'll be able to get $1 billion from that.
No, it's not even up to.
Exactly. So, but we do know for certain that we do have a funding crisis in the country. A lot of projects need funding, a lot of government agencies need funding. But where is the money coming from? And when you look at a project like Ajaokuta, it has consumed quite a huge amount of government funds. But what exactly is the solution to it? We need to find a solution to it. Are we going to concession it? Are we going to pump in more money into it so that we can move on? Or are we just simply going to sell it? It's a very valuable asset because when we're looking at industrialization, of course, steel is very, very important when we're talking about industrialization. So we definitely need to look for a solution to it. And I think the best solution forward is to probably concession this is the best solution forward for it.
All right.
But until then, we'll just wait and see what the government is going to do. It's one of those white elephant projects that has been going on for several years now.
Thank you, Gbolahan. Show on WhatsApp says, wait, I want to understand. I leave Nigeria to go to a country where system works, make it there, acquire assets and pay taxes there. Then Nigeria wants to grant me amnesty to pay taxes on those assets in Nigeria. Laugh out loud, he said. More messages here. This one, please add your names to your messages so we can take them. Dan on WhatsApp says, VOARS is illegal, and nobody's going to use it for the regularization of the tax affairs. There is no tax in Nigeria that imposes 35% rate, and our laws do not tax assets. It is a silly initiative, he said, by the government. Okay, Dan.
Also from Lekki says, on the morality issue, fraud, money laundering, and related issues are very separate issues. Money can only be taxed from legitimate income. And then Olatunji says from Afar says, the petroleum marketers are already warning fuel price will soon go high. If it would be easy to share NNPC income, it should be easy to generate fund. Okay, well, he's still talking about Business Express 91, even though he tagged it Freshly Press 91. Thank you, Olatunji. Yinka says, Ajaokuta will never produce a pin. If there is any shred of integrity on the part of the government, the affairs of Ajaokuta should have been probed. How hard is getting a private company to run it for us? Obviously, after a real feasibility study.
All right, so leading up to the next story from the Daily Times, before I'll come to you for this one, we know that currently the number of people in the world facing food crisis has remained well over 100 million in the last 3 years, and the number of countries affected have risen. Now, Nigeria has been named among the 8 countries having 2/3 of their population facing acute hunger. What are your thoughts on this?
Truly, once again, these indices that almost scare you out of taking your clothes off need to be said. Because sometimes I was telling them downstairs that what was Michael Jackson's most popular song, Man in the Mirror. Sometimes today, in these days and ages, we seem to deny the reality of what we're living in. We just close our eyes as long as it's okay for me. I could care less about the other people, but we cannot, and this has to change. Now, these indices are very, very thought-provoking, and they should shake us into some form of action. Here, the EU, the World Food Program, that's from the World Bank and United Nations, through the FAO, have announced,
being the Food and Agricultural Organization.
Yes, they've announced the indices that top 8 countries have 2/3 of their populations facing acute hunger. So, and Nigeria is among them. You have the DRC, Ethiopia, Southern Sudan, Syria, and Yemen. And in most, if you look at these, there's some kind of similarity amongst them. And in saying this, they mentioned that the root causes, they can address the root causes, which include conflict resolution, climate shocks, primary education. And I think the key one that wasn't mentioned was bad governance. The truth is,
corruption.
Corruption. Now, my real anger with this issue and my real state of what do you call it? SOP, state of national emergency, is that this state of hunger is the recipe for political manipulation, political suppression, depression, deprivation, oppression, and all forms of domination. Because hungry people don't think right. When a man is hungry, you know what happens. He can take any action. He can give even his dignity in the name of hunger. And we have to realize that 2/3 of how many are we in this country? Remember the last count? 180 million.
Is that an estimate?
That's if we go conservative, because we know we've crossed the 200 million mark. How can over 113 million people be hungry in this nation? That's acute hunger. Now, they did mention that the next level has about 42 countries, amounting to about 143 people, one step away from acute hunger. So you see that there's a gap, and that these 8 countries amassed practically the largest extent of hungry people in the world. Now, these are grave indices. Now, this is alongside all the other indices that we've been hearing across the times, that we've become the world's poverty capital, that 12 million children are out of school. There's water shortages, acute water shortages across Nigeria. We're the most miserable, one of the most miserable places to live in. You know, it's not simply because we need to hear these things. What are we doing as a country? As you do know, and when I speak of bad governance, at the end of the day, we have ourselves to blame as to what we are doing to get ourselves out of this. These are not just indices. We're talking about human beings, Nigerian citizens that find it difficult to feed themselves. And if I remember the last count, if I need to be corrected here, is that you're not able to provide yourself a meal a day. Acute hunger is not about 3 meals a day. I eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
4-in-1.
Yeah, 001. Many people in this 2/3 of this country cannot afford a meal a day. Let that sink in.
All right, we'll take this comment here. Adeyemi Oluwatayo Paul says, that's the reality responding to this particular story. The hunger is real everywhere. Some people are throwing away their leftover while some don't even have anything to eat. It's until we practice love, because a hungry man is an angry man.
Wow. Just so it might seem like a response to the last analysis, Deveo, because from Thisday newspaper, I'll have in front of the story that reads Presidency saying that they've spent 300 billion naira on social investment program. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, the government here, I mean, it's almost coincidental that they also made a presentation that's through the National Social Investment Program, headed by one of the erudite lawyers in this country. That was Mairo Ese. She was just more or less given a report sheet on how far they've gone. And basically they mentioned the 300 billion in about 3 years is far from their projections, because I think the budget position was about 500 billion per each year's budget. So you can see they've not been able to even meet up with their own objectives there. Now, they mentioned they have about 11.5 million direct beneficiaries on the program, 9 million indirect, 700,000 people on the social register, 300,000 people on the conditional cash transfer, which was all targeted at the most poor. Now, this whole social investment program.
You didn't mention trader money.
Yeah, no, I'm getting there. Now, all this was targeted at capacity building, investment, and direct support. Now, these programs are broken down. The conditional transfer, where they send about 10,000 to the poorest of the poor within the community. The school feeding program, which feeds over 9.5 million children nationwide in about 56,000 schools, which has been a plus, especially for farmers that have been patronized in terms of eggs, cattle, fruits, fish. And then the government enterprise empowerment program. Now, this is where they empower people in terms of using the trader money, where you get a loan, interest-free loan between 10,000 to 100,000 naira. You have the farmer money, the market money, and these are all interest-free loan initiatives. Now, my take here is this: listen, poverty alleviation. Poverty is never cured. What happens is wealth is created. I repeat myself: poverty is never cured. Wealth is created. What we're looking at is the governments that we have elected, both at federal and state level, working to create enabling environments so that we, the citizens, we, the people, the private sector, can develop the economy. Now, I take an example of the ease of doing business program, which was targeted at reducing the frustrations that Nigerian businessmen face at all levels, even at the micro SME level, in trying to make a penny or a kobo on their naira, because it is frustrating in this nation. There's so many political loopholes, infrastructural deficits that you have to cross over. Power alone wipes out your profits. So if we're going to address the acute hunger problem, the real issues that we should be looking at: wealth creation, good governance, and each and every one of us is responsible for and holding our leadership accountable for the promises that they give us.
And then health is very important, because child mortality is just one of the factors going into that indices, especially as Emmanuel on WhatsApp asks this question. It says, "Good morning, freshly pressed. How are indices for matters such as hunger measured?" And I would say on a global spectrum, it's measured by the Global Hunger Index. And there are 4 indicators there. Undernourishment is one, child wasting, that's the share of children under 5 who are wasted, that is, who have low weight for their height, measured, child stunting, and child mortality. That's speaking to under 5 and the 5 years old.
All right, we'll move on to our next story very quickly. Adedumade, I'll come to you for this one. Police reveal identities of Kolade Johnson's alleged killers. Now, yesterday we took the headline about the unfortunate incident that happened on Sunday night when a stray bullet hit Kolade Johnson, unfortunately killing him. And there was a debate yesterday. Should the suspects be revealed? Should they not be revealed? Well, today they have been revealed according to the New Telegraph. Could you please take us very quickly through this?
All right. First of all, I'd like to send my condolences to his family and friends, and also his child. I understand that they must be feeling very bad now. Now, also with regard to the names of the people who were responsible, that is Inspector Oguyemi Olalekan and Sergeant Godwin Oji. The debate was largely because one, the Nigerian police has the culture of showcasing people they've arrested for one thing, or the second. Now, why the debate was out was actually because people were wondering, okay, is this a case of double standards where when it becomes the time of the citizen, you show them out, and when it becomes one of your people, you keep them separate? So I'm glad that actually the police force came out and actually revealed the names of these people. It will also stem the actions of all the other officers who are involved in this kind of activities. But also, we must not forget that this raises the question of the NSARS, this raises the question of the reform Nigerian police, and this also raises the question of the safety of Nigerians out there. There's always been the allegations of unlawful acts by the police. There's always been allegations of unprofessional conduct by the police. Now, these issues have not been fully and totally taken care of as we stand now, because there are so many things that continue to happen. There is the unlawful killings, the alleged unlawful killings of suspects, and the alleged shooting of suspects as well. Now, this will take us, of course, to the police reform bill, which is before the Nigerian Senate, and we hope that it will receive a speedy hearing, at least maybe even be passed before the 8th Senate is over, because we don't know how long it's going to take the 9th one to actually get it done. There are very important points in the reform bill.
Can you just touch on them really quickly?
Yes, really quickly, which is creating and establishing a functioning system within the police, creating a safer environment for citizens, make room for collaboration between police and citizens, and other critical provisions which can be read on the blog.
Thank you very much. What did you say that you called?
Legal Niger.
All right, thank you very much, our legal mind, Adedumade. Adedumade, I'll stay with you for this one as well. Talking about security officials, military require alternative funding sources to tackle Boko Haram insecurity, says Air Chief. This is in the Daily Times. I know earlier on during Business Express, Reuters had a conversation about just how much money we do have in our nation, and if we're able to fund our different parastatals, ministries, and of course projects. Can you please take us through the story?
Yes, we're having a conversation downstairs before we came up, and the general conclusion was that our country is very, very broke. And we're finding it very difficult to do the needful, especially with regards to our financial obligations. Now, of course, we know that the armed forces have been funded over the years, especially with regard to the Boko Haram insurgency in the northeast. And they've received a lot of funds, they've bought a lot of arms, but to note that they're still complaining that they still don't have enough money, well, that sheds some light on one, maybe the culture within the army as it relates to financial prudence, and also as it relates to the closure of gaps by which some of this cash that is paid to them escapes. Now, they've also mentioned some things, the Air Chief particularly mentioned some things as regard PPP with Nigeria's Air Force and the private sector. Now, he said something about percentage from financial institutions, that's the profit they get from them, should be channeled towards security, and also that mobile phone operators should be charged a levy, of course, which of course will be directed towards national security. I don't think Nigerians in total are going to totally accept these initiatives that are being proposed, and maybe the government will have to look for other ingenious ways to get them these funds that they want. but most especially, I would also like to see the anti-corruption agencies in Nigeria look into the military. I think that's very important.
All right,
as well.
in terms of investigation, and we have known that in the past, the military have been plagued with issues of diverting funds and then to go to fighting
like a whole ship of
insurgency.
oil just got lost in Nigeria.
Very interesting.
All right.
We have messages here. Yinka very quickly says, between when the former IG left and when the VP stepped on board of the issue, and even with the new IG, SARS has been reformed like twice, yet a life was lost again. Does that not tell us that if we keep doing things the same way and expecting different results is just pure insanity? It shows that reforming SARS does not fix SARS, rather a change of orientation. What's the requirement of joining the force? Most people there today are jobless people, he said, who just want to do any job, and hence police work just comes along. That's where the problem lies.
I think it's important to also separate the SARS and the SACs. And SACs are the ones who are in the public eye with this particular case. SACs is Special Anti-Cultism Squad.
Yes.
So the Special Anti-Robbery Squad. So when we're saying end SARS, we also need to look at the other end. You know, the special.
So the police force in general.
Yes, no, well, the special squads who take the law into, who have special powers to do special things.
That's right.
All right, okay, we'll move on to Osun State for this one. Very quickly, Gbolahan. Osun Guba election, court nullifies Adeleke's candidacy. This is from the Premium Times. Now, the court was presided by Osman Musa, and I know just a few days back there was rejoicing as it was said that the court ruled in favor of him for the Osun elections.
Yep.
But now they're saying that they're disqualifying his candidacy. Can you take us through the story, please?
Well, this is very interesting. I mean, we're having this ping pong back and forth going on in Osun State. I mean, the Senator Adeleke was proclaimed the winner of the election that happened in Osun State, but now we're having
proclaimed. The court ruled in his
favor. Yes, that he's is supposed to be the winner anyway. So. Right now, at the moment, we have a High Court judgment now which says that in the first place he shouldn't have even run for the election in the first place because he didn't have the appropriate credentials to run the elections, which was his WAEC certificate.
Secondary school leaving certificate.
Yes, his WAEC secondary school leaving certificate. It's actually been claimed now that he doesn't actually have the right credentials. And the reason for that is what they're saying is that he didn't actually graduate from the secondary school that he claimed he went to, which is a school called Muslim High School in Ede, Osun. Yeah. It was actually said that they actually went into the storage or to gather some information about him attending that school, and it was actually saying that his name was not amongst the names of the people that actually attend the school, and this was looking at the register as a 1980 register. But and he said he graduated in 1981, and that WAEC does actually have the certificate to show that he did actually graduate. But as it stands now, this is a High Court ruling. Senator Adeleke is actually saying that he's going to appeal the case anyway. So we'll wait and see what the outcome of this is.
All right. Thank you very much. Now, we have here, Gbolahan, I'll stay with you for this one. Ex-generals, others petition reps over compulsory retirement. So no fewer than 26 senior military officers, including a former major general and 10 retired brigadier generals, have petitioned the Speaker, House of Representatives, Yakubu Godogara, over their compulsory retirement from the Nigerian Army.
Yeah, apparently these military men were retired, not according to their will. They were actually retired, and this was going by a when we're talking about a section of the law, which is a rule 020810 section 1, which actually says that you will be retired upon attaining the age of 60, or if you have served for 35 years. So the dispute now is that these military men are actually saying that they haven't actually served for 35 years and neither have they attained the age of 60. So why have they been retired now? I mean, this is one of the issues that we have in this country when things are done indiscriminately without actually following due process.
But so looking at the story, are there special circumstances that call for retirement of certain military officials, even if they haven't attained 60 or spent 35 years in service?
Well, I mean, according to this report, it doesn't actually say that there's special requirements or there's special conditions for retiring people. Anyway, what the military has gone by is this rule, the section that they've gone by. And when you look at the rule, they haven't attained the age of 35, they haven't attained the age of 60, and neither have they worked up until for 35 years.
All right, thank you very much. We'll keep a close eye on this story. If there are updates, we'll definitely be bringing it your way. Now, finally, here, very quickly, Devo, name Lagos City Hall after Fasinro. This is by Hassan Adisa Babatunde Fasinro, who passed away on Sunday evening.
Well, it's a life worth celebrating, not just for the longevity, but also indeed, apart from being the senator in the Second Republic, he was the first clerk of the Lagos City Council. Now, the AD has pushed for some form of immortalization by changing the Lagos City Hall and naming him after him. Well, all well said and done, but I think immortalization should go beyond memorabilia, name recall. They should be looking at initiatives that bring to fruition the stellar ideals that Pa Fasinro stood for in those days of the Second Republic. We had a better Lagos then, and I think they would be proud that some of the ideals they stood for are taking shape and form within the lives of Lagos City residents.
All right.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that. Very quickly, let's just take one last message before we go. This one is from Kudos. Kudos says, so the dancing senator who won at the elections petitions tribunal has now been dismissed as not having the requisite qualifications contest in the first place. Question is, on what basis was he deemed to have won the election as declared by the election tribunal, when in the first place he wasn't even qualified to contest?
Thank you very much, right there. Now, failing exams continuously also leads to retirement. Thank you very much for that one. Agogo Sam responding to the hunger situation says, hungry people don't think right. One of the quotes of the year. Well done, Devo. We have some initiatives outlined in the Sustainable Development Goals to address hunger. It will be good to know the progress of these initiatives.
Special thanks to the analysts who stepped in this morning to analyze these stories. Adedumade is up on Twitter as Adedumade. Thank you, Adedumade. And thank you, Deveo, at Deveo Okorie. And special thanks to you, Gbolahan, at Mr. G Quest. Lagos, join us next as we talk sports inside of the